Welcome to our webinar with Bravo Migration. It's a pleasure to have you here. My name is Erica, and I'm one of the co-founders and directors here at Bravo. We're going to be talking about regional visas and what each state and territory is seeking when looking at nominating visa candidates, what kind of profile they're looking for, what the requirements are, and what occupations they're looking for. I have just come back from the migration conference organized by Migration Alliance, and most of the states and territories were present and presented in the conference. So I have some fresh information to provide to you guys. So a little bit about us. As we start, we're a migration firm founded in 2008. This is our 15th anniversary this year, and I've been a registered agent for 18 years. We are a law firm. We have solicitors and migration agents, and we have worked together in more than 8,000 visa applications over the years. We specialize in skilled employer and family visas, but we also work with student visas and some other types as business. We don't work with protection or humanitarian visas. That's not our specialty. This is me. As I said, have been registered for over 18 years. I am a migrant myself. I came to Australia in 1996, and I've been working with international students and migrants since. I am a presenter, not just to our audience. Our webinars are very popular. I'm always very happy to be presenting. We always get great feedback about my webinars, and it's something I enjoy very much doing. But I also present to other migration agents and solicitors. I'm part of Legal Training Australia, which is an organization that educates other migration agents and solicitors. I am also an assessor for the capstone exam, which is the exam every migration agent has to pass to become registered with the Department of Immigration. Now, today we're not going to cover personal cases. We're not going to be able to answer personal questions about, in my case, what do I do? In my case, do I qualify? So if you want personalized advice, if you want to know how what visas you can apply for, then we offer a visa action plan consultation. If you get on the QR code here, you'll be taken to a link with details about how that visa consultation works, what's included, what's not included, and etc. Now, what are we covering today? We're here to talk about state nominations, but which visas require state nominations? So I'm going to touch on those visas, and then we're going to go look at every state and territory and what they're seeking at the moment. So we have several different types of visas in Australia. We have different programs under which these visas sit. So if you're looking at partner visa, if you're in a relationship with an Australian citizen or an Australian permanent resident, then you're applying for a partner visa or a prospective marriage visa. These visas sit under what we call family visas. So that's one program, the family program. If you're looking at staying or coming and moving to Australia based on your skills and your abilities and your occupation, chances are you're going to be applying for a visa within the skilled migration program. Within the skilled migration program, we have employer-sponsored visas that, as the name says, require a job offer from an Australian employer. And we have general skilled migration visas, which don't require you to have an employer. Now, we get calls and emails and inquiries via websites, via Instagram, you name it, every day from people all over the world asking us, how do I get a job in Australia? can you find me a job in Australia? I want a sponsorship visa. Get me a sponsorship visa. Several different types of asking the same question. For you to apply for a sponsorship visa, be it a temporary employer sponsored visa or a permanent employer nomination visa, you first need a job in your field, and it needs to be a skilled field. So if you're looking at non-skilled positions, they're not part of the skilled migration program. As the name says, you need to be in a skilled position. So we also get inquiries from people saying, how do I get a visa to Australia in an unskilled position? We can't help you there. If you want to apply under the skilled migration program, under the employer sponsored visas, you need to first find a job in a skilled role that you have a background with, and then we can help you with the visa application. We are not a recruitment agency. We don't provide job search services. We don't do job matching. And a lot of people out of the blue contact us saying, get me a sponsorship visa, get me a work visa. We can work on the visa application after you found a job yourself. So if you're watching us today wondering, can these guys get me a job? The answer is no. But we can work on your visa application, we can guide you, and that's what we do. We're a law firm that specializes in family and skilled visas. Now, within the skilled migration program, that's the employer sponsored visas. And then we have the general skilled migration visas, as some people call them, the points tested visas or the skill select visas. So these are the three visas in front of you today. We have the visas for, we have two permanent subclasses, subclass 189 and 190, and we have one temporary subclass, subclass 491. They all don't require a job offer. So people can apply separately from an employer. We don't need to involve an employer at all. Subclass 189 is the independent permanent skilled visa. Independent meaning you don't need an employer, and you also don't need a state or territory of Australia to be part of that application. It is completely managed by Skill Select, and you are invited based on your ranking within pool of professionals or skilled professionals who are sitting there also waiting to be invited. Subclass 190 is very similar. It's called Subclass 190 State Nominated Permanent Skilled Visa. And this visa requires state or territory nomination. That's the main difference between Subclass 190 and Subclass 189. Subclass 491 also requires state or territory nomination, but this is a temporary visa. It's a 5 years visa. It is called Skilled Provisional Regional Visa. This visa will force the holder to live in a designated regional area while they're holding this visa. After they do that for 3 years, they may be able to apply for permanent residence later. These three visas require a score on the points test, 65 points. Occupations eligible to nominate for these visas are in different lists. So the 189 visa only has a small list of occupations available. These are the occupations that are in super high demand. They are called medium and long-term occupations. So, yeah, skills assessments required in those three visas, and these visas are only available if you are aged under 45. So on the day you turn 45, these three visas unfortunately become impossible. There are no exceptions, no exemptions, and no workarounds the legislation, unfortunately. Now, subclass 190, we have occupations that are medium and long term as well, but we have occupations also from the short term list. So the STSOL is the short-term skills occupation list. So subclass 190, you might be thinking, why am I going to apply for a subclass 190 when I can apply for subclass 189? It may be that your occupation is not available for this visa, and then your only option is subclass 190. Now, subclass 491 has even more occupations available. You can nominate any occupation in these two lists, plus another list called regional occupation list. Now, you also get more points in this visa. So some people might not score 65 if they choose subclass 189 or 190, but they may score 65 if they choose subclass 491. It may be a better option for them. They may not score the minimum if they choose one of these other subclasses. All three visas require a positive skills assessment in the nominated occupation. So if you're a chemical engineer, you can't just apply for these visas and say, I'm a chemical engineer. We're going to have to apply for a skills assessment with the Institute of Engineers Australia. And then they are going to say, yes, you are a chemical engineer for Australian standards. And from then on, we can proceed with your application. All three visas, we can't just lodge the application. That is possible with an employer-sponsored visa, for example. I can just go into the department's system and start drafting your application. With these visas, we need an invitation from Skill Select, which is a database from the Department of Immigration. As I said, subclass 189, this visa is, you are invited depending on your ranking, on your score for the points test. Subclass 190 and 491, as they require state and territory nomination, you are invited when you are nominated. So when a state or territory agrees to nominate you, that triggers an invitation from Skill Select. So we can't just apply, but you need a skills assessment for starters. So each state and territory, if they're also involved in the selection process for subclass 190 and 491, each state and territory will have their own set of requirements and occupation lists as well. So they decide who they're going to nominate, who they're going to give visas in a financial year. And that's the topic of our webinar today. Now, just to make sure you understand, these two visas require state or territory nomination. 189 doesn't, but it's harder to get. So these two visas are the visas that states and territories will decide who gets, what kind of professional, what's that person's profile. So every financial year, the federal government decides how many permanent visas, including 491 visas, which they're not permanent, but they lead to a permanent visa after 3 years. So they really require planning. Every financial year, the federal government decides, okay, this financial year, we're going to approve X number of 189 visas, X number of 190 visas, and X number of 491 visas. Because, as I said, 491 visa is valid for 5 years, but after 3 years, living and working in a regional area, you can apply for a permanent version of that visa. So this is called annual migration planning levels, because when you become a permanent resident, when you get a 491 visa, you have access to certain benefits. You can get Medicare. You can sometimes have subsidies for public education. You could get a childcare rebate and many other benefits. So the government has to plan every financial year how much this is going to cost that the government. So at a federal level, the government decides how many people are going to get those visas. They also decide how many partner visas, how many business visas, and others. But we're here talking about just the GSM state-nominated visas. Once they decide the number of places, they allocate those places to states and territories. So this financial year has been a bit weird. The financial year starts on the 1st of July. Normally, places are allocated right in the middle of July, and the states and territories start inviting people from then. This year, things were a bit slow. The states and territories were only allocated places um, around August. And some, we only were told of how many places they were allocated in September. And when the states and territories got their numbers, they were a bit paralyzed and they only started really nominating people. Some states by the end of September, some states only now in October. Most importantly, they had to sit down and review what their requirements were going to be for this financial year because they did not get a lot of places. As you can see, we're seeing that every state and territory got less places than they got last year. So the states and territories had to say, oh, what we're going to do. Now, this doesn't mean that the current financial year is not a good year for migrants. There's a lot of places for the 189 visa. There's been no invitation rounds yet, so we're a bit also trying to understand what's happening. And this government wants to move, it's wanting to move their program in terms of how many more migrants they're going to get. But unfortunately, they decided not to give a lot of numbers of places for subclass 190 and 491. And this may be because there's a lot of people who were invited last year who are still in the pipeline and need to be granted the visas because these are not the numbers necessarily that the states and territories can invite, but these are the numbers that they can grant visas to. So there might be a lot of people still from last financial year in the pipeline that haven't been granted visas. We don't know because this government said this financial year they really wanted to increase the number of permanent migrants. There's a lot of places for the 189 visa, but there's been no invitation rounds. And they reduced the number of 190 and 491 visas. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to us, but this is what the situation is. Now, this is the federal annual planning levels that I was talking about earlier. And as you can see, we're expecting 138,000 places for visas this year. So the majority of places have been allocated to employer-sponsored visas and the 189 visas. So skilled independent means 189, followed by the regional visa, which is 491, and the state nominated visa, which is the 190. So we were expecting the states and territories to get a lot of places, but they got way less than was planned. And what does this say? That skilled independence still has a lot of places, but like I said, no invitation round has happened since May, which was last financial year. And the biggest chunk of places is going to employer-sponsored visas. So we normally say that to everyone. The employer-sponsored visa is a better option, always. If you can get sponsored and move to a permanent employer visa, or if you can apply directly for an employer permanent visa. This is the focus of this government. This was the focus last year. This is normally what the government wants. If you can get a job here, they know you're going to be okay. You're not going to become a burden in the system. Therefore, there's always more places. Now, this year, even though there seems to be a lot of places for the general skilled migration visas, no invitation rounds for 189, and way less places allocated in real life to the states and territories. This also means if you can change your strategy from a GSM visa to an employer visa, better. Now, some occupations can get sponsored, but they cannot proceed to a permanent employer visa. This is also about to change. The government has officially announced in two different places that they are going to remove the restriction from the permanent employer visa 186, where only some occupations can go from the sponsorship 482 visa to a 186 permanent visa, and every occupation that gets sponsored could proceed to a permanent visa as long as all other requirements are met. So this means that once more, for another reason, employer sponsored visa may be a better option for you. Now, with this few allocations received, what happens? The states and territories will become more strict, more restrictive, more stringent. And that's what we're going to look at today. So, Victoria, for example, has made their requirements more flexible, but their invitations are being very selective, is the word I'm going to use. So you cannot apply for Victorian state nomination directly. You need to register interest. And to register interest, you need to be living and working in regional Victoria if you're applying for the 491 visa. And there's more flexibilities with the 190. Now, if you don't meet these requirements, don't waste your time registering interest. You're not going to be selected. If you believe you meet the requirements, then you must register interest via their website, but that does not guarantee you will be selected. And I really hope you understand this. I see a lot of people saying to us, I've registered my interest and I'm waiting for them and I'm not doing anything else. You should be looking at a plan B. You should be thinking about what am I going to do if I don't get invited? Because there's a chance you're not going to get invited this financial year. If you're here in Australia already and you have a visa expiring, you really should be thinking about what am I going to do if this doesn't happen? And if you are a skilled professional and you had enough English language proficiency to register your interest and meet their requirements, you should be looking at an employer sponsor visa for sure. Now, Victoria is open for the whole instrument. What does that mean? We have for each one of those three visas, there's a legislative instrument that defines the occupations that are open for the visa. And as I said, for the 189, that instruments the medium and long-term skills shortage list. 190, that and the short term. 491, those two lists and the regional visa. Victoria is open for the whole instrument, which is the three lists, but they have already declared that these sectors will have priority. Health, social services, IT, education, manufacturing, infrastructure, renewable energy, and hospitality and tourism for just for the 491 visa. If your occupation is not here, you can still register interest, but your chances of being invited are low unless you have something special about yourself. Now, if you're selected, then and only then you can apply for state nomination if they approve your state nomination, because you may be thinking, especially if you're working by yourself, you may be thinking that you qualify for state nomination and the visa, but then the state selects you, and when they process your documentation, they go like, oh, you don't qualify because of this problem here. Again, that's why it's very important to work with a migration professional. Now, if you're not living and working in Victoria, as I said, there's chances of you being invited if you are offshore, but only if you're in these sectors as well. So be careful. Subclass 491, you must be living and working in Victoria. Now, regional Victoria is only accepted, so Melbourne is excluded. So, yeah. Now, Queensland is also open, and they changed their requirements from last year. So they were open from 5th of September, excuse me, and they have updated their Queensland skilled occupation list, which is directed at those people living offshore. If you are in Australia, then Queensland also looks at the whole instrument. Invitation rounds will happen at the end of each month. Now, as I said, any occupation is available if you are applying under one of these streams, except if you are offshore. If you are offshore, you can only apply if your occupation is in this list. Now, if you are onshore, you can apply under the graduate stream, the skilled workers living in Queensland stream, or the small business owners. Again, you can't apply for nomination. You need to express interest via skill select and wait until Queensland selects you. Now, when we say graduates of a Queensland university, we're not saying anyone who studied at a Queensland university. There's a lot of restrictions. If you are a graduate of a non-university course, you will not be selected. As simple as that. If you finished a course at university, you need to have one of these, you need to meet one of these criteria. So if you're expressing interest for the 190 visa, your score in the points test needs to be 65. If you're expressing interest for the 491, 65 is acceptable. Competent English and completed 100% of studies in Queensland and graduated in the last 2 years. Now, again, even if you have studied at university, it's not any graduate that Queensland wants. They want doctorate graduates, any graduate. They want graduates from master's degrees in STEM or agriculture fields. So STEM means science, technology, engineering, or maths. And only graduates that are employed full-time, meaning 30 hours a week at least. So if you're a doctorate graduate, no worries. If you're working or not, it doesn't matter. Queensland probably will want to nominate you. If you finished a master's in a STEM or agriculture field, you need to be employed in your nominated occupation. If you finished a master's degree and it's not in a STEM or agriculture field, you also need to be employed, but they're also going to look at your GPA, your general score for your master's degree. And the same with bachelor degree graduates. So your scores will matter. Again, if you graduated from a vocational course, Queensland will not nominate you. Skilled workers living in Queensland need to have been working, excuse me, for at least 3 months on a full-time basis. If you're working part-time while holding a student visa now, unfortunately, that's not going to be enough. If you want to express interest for the 491 visa, then your work needs to be in regional Queensland. So what is regional Queensland? Is the whole state except Brisbane. Now, if you're working in Brisbane, you could express interest for the 190 visa. You must also provide evidence that you have an ongoing job. So if you say, yes, I've worked for 3 months, but I'm unemployed now, Queensland will not nominate you. Now, if you are offshore, if you're watching us today live, or if you're watching the recording of this webinar, you need to have an occupation in the Queensland skills occupation list, and each occupation has a minimum work experience requirement. Queensland doesn't have a priority sector like Victoria does. They are open for the whole instrument, so any occupation on the program. Now, the small business operators is a very successful program for Queensland. It is, and please, before you drop everything and buy a business in Queensland, hear me out. You still need to meet all the other requirements. You need to nominate an occupation. You need to get a skills assessment. You need to be under 45, etc., etc. But if you are in Queensland and you have full work rights, so you're on a graduate visa, your wife or your husband is on a sponsorship visa, then if you can work full time for at least 6 months, then maybe if you have bought a business in Queensland, you could apply under this stream. But notice, this is only for the 491 visa, not the 190, and the business must have been purchased by for at least $100,000. Now, to be eligible for Pathway 2, you need to have started a business from scratch and the business reached a turnover of at least 200,000 in the previous year. There's a lot of restrictions. The business cannot be in Brisbane. It has to be in regional Queensland. That includes the Gold Coast, for example. And there's some caveats. It can't be a sub-franchise. A lot of people abuse the system, as people do. It can't be gas stations. It can't be an Uber business that you're running by yourself. It has to be a bona fide business. Now, moving to Western Australia, they have more flexible requirements, but they also were given less places. So we don't know how many people really they're going to select. Again, you can't apply directly. You need to select, to be selected by WA. WA has 3 different pathways, what we call Schedule 1 general stream. That's mainly for health occupations, and people can express interest, but only if they have at least 1 year of experience in their occupations overseas or 6 months in Australia, and they must have a full-time employment contract. This is open to anyone, anywhere. They don't have to be in WA. Schedule 2 general stream has way more occupations, but they don't require work experience. Graduate stream is for people who have completed 2 years of study in WA and now have an occupation in the graduate occupation list. So WA has 3 occupation lists, one for each one of these streams. Again, you need to lodge an expression of interest. You need to wait, and not always WA invites people. I had someone last year who wasn't invited, and then he turned 45 and he lost all his hope. He missed on the chance of applying for a GSM visa. And then after you are invited, only then you lodge your state nomination application. This is the last invitation round for WA. They invited people on the 14th of October. They invited 650 health professionals. They invited 961 general professionals for the 191 visa and 240 for the 491 visa, and more under the graduate stream. So they're really going for it. They're going to run out of invitations very soon. So that's what we predict is going to happen. If a state invites a lot of people, they're going to run out of invitations soon, and they're going to close the program probably in January if they go fast. Tasmania also had minor changes, and they shifted to a registration of interest system last year. They kept this year. They really look at the whole instrument is open, but they really look at people who are in Tasmania already. That's their priority. They nominate people who have finished studying there from 1 to 2 years. If you finish studying 1 year, you can express interest for the 491, 2 years, 190. They look at people who have been working full time in Tasmania. Those are the two priorities. And then they look at people from overseas who have a job offer. And lastly, they look at people who have been living there for 2 years but couldn't really establish themselves in their occupation and are working in a different occupation. And also people who started or bought a business similar to Queensland. If people are working full time, they need to nominate an occupation in this list here. It's not everyone who can express interest. Looking at Canberra, Canberra always invites a lot of people. They're very prolific in that sense. They have their own points test. It's called the Canberra Matrix, and you need to go into their website and calculate your points. They invite people based on their points. They held an invitation round on the 16th of October. And again, they look at people who are living and working in Canberra already, and they look at people who are overseas as well. But guess what? Who is their priority? People who are in Canberra already. If you're expressing interest for the 491 visa, you must be living and working in Canberra for at least 3 months. If you are expressing interest with the 190 visa, you must be living and working in Canberra for at least 6 months. That doesn't mean if you're watching us today or you're watching the recording, that doesn't mean you have no chance if you're overseas. But I hope you've been noticing that there's a pattern here. Most states and territories, probably all states and territories, will prioritize people who are here already. So we always say to people, if your country is a country where you can get a working holiday visa, come to Australia on a working holiday visa, have a consultation with us, find out which state or territory is really looking for your occupation, and then start working there because you're going to increase your chances of getting a general skilled migration visa. If your country is not part of the working holiday program, maybe look at genuine studies. Come and improve your English if English is not your first language, because you're going to need to sit for a test to get any of these visas. And at the same time, you may choose to be working in a state that's looking to nominate people from your occupation. Or if you don't have an occupation, a skilled occupation, maybe come to Australia to study and acquire a skilled occupation. And then, with our help, choose where the best place is for you to do those studies. Because really, that's what the states and territories want, especially when they get not so many allocations like this year. They will be choosing people who are here already. And if you're not here, it's not impossible, but it's going to be harder. And lastly, we have New South Wales, South Australia, and the Northern Territory, the last 3 states to open for nominations. New South Wales has ditched their occupation list, and it looks like Victoria, they are focusing on target sectors. Now, as I said, I was in a conference with all the states and territories a couple of weeks ago. New South Wales was very clear. They are not going to invite you if you're not in these target sectors. But if you have a high points score, they may invite you. So nothing prevents you from submitting an expression of interest. What we tell people is, don't submit an expression of interest if you don't meet criteria. But if you meet criteria and you're not sure if you are the state's priority or not, still submit an expression of interest, because who knows, they may invite you. They're going to have skilled invitation rounds, and apparently they're happening already for New South Wales. So these are their target sectors. Now, in terms of requirements, if you want to express interest for the 190, you must be living in New South Wales for the past 6 months, or you should be outside of Australia for the past 6 months. They don't want people to keep moving in and out just to meet the requirements. The 491 program is closed. They're not inviting anyone, and they have said, we're going to open soon, but we haven't seen any movement. They did not give us a date. South Australia, like Queensland, they were both present in the conference, and they made very, very clear that they will prioritize people who are in Australia. They want to keep their graduates in the state, and they want to keep people who are working. So if you're working in your occupation in South Australia or in Queensland, you have good chances of being invited. Now, South Australia has a few streams. They have also a graduate stream. They have a working South Australia stream. They have a highly skilled and talented stream, and they are open to nominate candidates offshore. But again, priority is for these two first streams here, graduates and working South Australia. Now, you need to submit an expression of interest and register interest. And you first and foremost need to go to the South Australia website, find your occupation in their occupation list. They are open to all occupations, and look at which streams are available for your occupation. Not all streams, not all 4 streams are available to all occupations. You need to find your occupation first and then see your what's required of you. Graduates need to have been studying for at least 2 years minimum. Working in South Australia needs to be at least 6 months. So be careful there. The Northern Territory reopened this week, so they were the last to reopen. Therefore, they're the last ones in my slides. And they only reopened for subclass 491. They are not nominating people for subclass 190. They are looking at people who finished 2 years of studies in the Northern Territory and who are on a graduate visa, or they're looking at people who have been living and working full-time in the territory. They only got 500 places. So let's go back to the numbers of places. The Northern Territory, actually I lied, 500 places was last year. They only got 250 places for the 190 visa. So it's like they're really not going to nominate a lot of people. They're going to really be very picky and choosy with who they nominate. And they only got 400 places for the 491 visa. These are the people they're nominating now. Canberra only got 600 places for each visa, so they're going to run out of places quickly because they've been the state that's been nominating people more constantly. WA, as I said, they invited a lot of people already. They got a decent number of places, but is this going to last until the end of the financial year? I don't know. Queensland didn't get a lot of places. As you can see, they got less than South Australia, which is weird. New South Wales and Victoria got the biggest number, but Victoria didn't get a lot of 491s, which we also don't understand why. So when looking at what the states and territories are seeking in someone, not only they have their own process to nominate you, they have their own requirements to nominate you, they also will have to be very picky in terms of who they nominate. And you may think you meet all the requirements and you might not be chosen because of whatever. Whatever they think that's wrong with you, or it's just that because there's someone with a better profile than you. So unfortunately, not a safe bet to be expressing interest for these visas now. If your visa is about to expire, you're already in Australia, you really need to be thinking about a plan B. Now, if you want to know more, we have a Visa News channel on our website. You can follow the QR code and read a lot about everything migration. We also have a YouTube channel with another QR code that you can follow and get more uh, um, information. And again, if you're looking for personalized advice, we have a Visa Action Plan consultation that you can book with us. Unfortunately, I won't have time to cover everyone's questions. We received a ton of questions. If your question is not about these visas, please get in touch with us so we can have a consultation with you. I have some questions here about partner visas, about um, parent visas, and it's going to be a little bit hard for me to answer. Some questions are very specific about people. Get in touch with us for personalized advice. The webinar is for general information. There's one question here that I want to answer that I think it's general enough. Someone's asking, if halfway through I've received an invitation for a 190 or a 491 visa, I get a job with an employer sponsor, what will happen? It depends on what you want. If you are, if you received an invitation and then you're gonna have 60 days to lodge the 190 or the 491 visa. If you decide in that meantime you receive a sponsorship job offer, in that meantime, if you haven't lodged your 190 491 visa, you can decide to go with the employer sponsored visa. But it's very important for you to make an informed decision. Talk to us. We're going to look at all your options and we're going to help you make a decision in terms of which visa is better for you, which visa is cheaper, which visa is more confirmed and assured for you, and also which visa takes you to permanent residence faster, because that's what's the best visa. Always the answer will be the one that takes you to permanent residence. A permanent visa gives you access to Medicare, full work rights, and access to benefits, government benefits, and the option to become a citizen later. So, it's much better to get a permanent visa. Someone else is asking me about what should I do before I register interest. Sorry, yeah, that's not exactly how the question was phrased, but I'll make it easier. So, what should I do before I registered interest? So, if your state and territory today is a state that requires registration of interest, every state will have a different system. So, when the state requires registration of interest, then you need to go to that state or territory's website. They will have a system like Victoria, the ACT, South Australia, and you put your information there. But most importantly, you need to consult with an agent first, because you may be wasting your time. If you go and register interest and you don't meet all the criteria, nothing's going to happen. And you're not going to receive an answer from the state saying, sorry, but you shouldn't have registered because you don't qualify. They don't have time or the personnel to do that. So that's when you need to talk to an agent. So we will tell you, is it worth registering interest, or should you be looking at another pathway? The same happens with states where there is no registration of interest. You need to submit an expression of interest with skill select and wait for that state to see you and invite you. What we're going to do is, we're then with time, we're going to sit down with you and say, you have X amount of chance of being invited. We'll have time to talk to you about what the states tell us. We're not saying we're special, but we go to conferences. We have a communication channel with the states and territories, so we can then use the information we have to create a pathway for you. But that it's for our clients who hire us to work on their case. Beautiful. As I said, I've ran out of time. If you're here today and you want to know about your chances, you really need to book a consultation with us. We're not going to be able to give you that information today or via email. It's been great chatting with you virtually. I hope you have enjoyed the webinar, and I hope to see you either in one of our consultations, in person, or via Zoom. And I hope to see you in Australia if you're not here yet. Have a great rest of your day or night, wherever you are. Bye.